Psychological safety is a key ingredient for high-performing teams. You've heard about it multiple times, you've read about it, and maybe if you were lucky enough, you worked in great teams where psychological safety was a reality. But what is it? How do we define it? How do we foster this sense of safety in a team? How do we safeguard this safety over time? Today, I will interview Jared Olhoft, a technology executive with 20 years of experience driving organizational success and leading high-performing teams. We will talk about his background in the technology industry and why psychological safety is so important for him as a leader and how to enable it. Jared, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to get into it and chat.
Very good. Let's get started with the very basics. What do you do today for a living?
What do I do? Uh, I am a product and engineering leadership. And if I say that to my mom, she goes, "Well, what does that actually mean?" And I like to build cool stuff with cool people, and hopefully have some fun along the way. And so really it's trying to build teams, systems, platforms, and deliver software to other businesses or consumers out on the internet uh, that are useful and valuable to them. So that's what I do.
Very good. And how did you get to where you are today? Tell us a little bit about your story in technology.
Yeah. Um, I'll kind of go back to even middle school. My first time really was playing with Microsoft Excel at the behest of my dad, doing a whole bunch of data entry and discovering that you could do macros and Visual Basic and things to speed this repetitive process. And then fast forward years later, I found myself an enlisted Marine in the United States Marine Corps. I did my occupational specialty training in finance. And at my first duty station was kind of volunteered or fell into an IT support role at the office that I went to. And over the years in the Marines, I just continued to have kind of a technology focus as a secondary job. And that was things like learning what access was and access forms and just kind of scraping the surface on databases. And so when I left the Marine Corps for the civilian world around 2005, 2006, I chose to go and start doing school in the evenings for computer science. And I was working full time in kind of a general IT role. And throughout that early period of my career, technology career, I really just jumped on opportunities to go above and beyond. So when we needed a tweak to a website, even though I didn't know how to do it, I was like, I can figure this out, get into books, make adjustments, figure out how to get a Google map to display with pins, all those types of things. So it was really just leaning into extra opportunities, and then falling into just a professional, traditional software engineering, uh, agile based software development teams in various industries. And over the years, decades even, that slowly progressed into more business facing, product led kind of leadership roles. And in around 2018, I went and decided to do executive MBA program at a university here in the Twin Cities called the University of St. Thomas. And that really kind of helped me pivot and understand and learn a lot more about myself, about executive leadership, and then make that pivot to a more CTO, like head of product, head of engineering type environment where I'm really building out teams of people, selecting how we're going to structure the teams, the org, the processes that will build and deliver the software and systems that are needed. So there you go. That's how I got here.
It's an amazing story. Now, let me ask you two questions. The first one, Excel and helping your father out, but or tell me more about that. How does a kid end up, working out formulas in Excel?
Uh, so that was my dad was a longtime project manager and consultant over the years. And so when I was in middle school, he ended up with I guess like an accounting audit type project, and there was just a whole bunch of data entry that needed to be done and like verification of
Oh,
pen and paper ledgers. So literally, right, like old actual ledgers and what do you call it? 10 key, uh,
yeah.
typed out tapes, right? Your accounting tapes. And so it was just, yeah, it was a whole bunch of data entry, getting manual paper stuff into spreadsheets, and then auditing against my older sister who was doing Excel entry with me. Uh, and we would have to cross-reference like what was the validity of the data that you entered. Were there typing mistakes or not? So anyways,
Did your sister get into technology as well? Both were going through that experience with your father. You could have hated it or loved it. You clearly loved it. How about your sister?
I think she loved it. It was good money for teenagers at the time, and she did not go into technology. She's definitely technology savvy, but is more in that uh, an Uber organizer. So that project management,
Mm,
program management, office director is really that's the route she went.
got it. Very good. And then, um, so you started leading teams and you did the executive MBA back in 2018. How much of you have been leading teams for a while now, right? But how much of
Yeah.
what you do you think you learned without practice, and how much of what you do did the MBA taught you a lot on how to manage certain situations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's kind of hard to answer too, right? When you think about it, like how much do you just inherently learn as you go through doing, stumbling, coming out of, faux pas and mistakes and adjusting from there. But I do think there's a lot that's conditioned. So you have to be in the right environments. My early time in the US military, there's a ton of just conditioning and repetition, right? And doctrine that goes along with it. And so I think a lot of that becomes inherent, and it's very much small team, small unit leadership focused for how I was trained. Coming out of that experience into agile software development, so I guess late 2000s was my first real, you know, proper Scrum based, multiple Scrum team engineering environment, right? Really formal software development. Um, Migrating from a waterfall type organization, and that was just a supernatural environment. Is right, like pizza box size teams. Like if you're doing it by the book, that's the same as the hierarchical structure of you've got platoons and squads and fire teams, which is a four person unit. And so yeah, it was a natural in terms of like shape, structure, closeness, uh, constant daily interactions, really similar experience for me. And so that all kind of came together, and just really was built upon over the years through practice, right? So from kind of being a team lead of just one Scrum team to multiple Scrum teams, also then bringing on offshore resources and just things like that, start to expand out that um, personal scope of influence, I guess. And then to connect the dots, I think the big things that the MBA program brought was executive coaching, peer coaching, and a more deep self-awareness, right? And so it's emotional intelligence and finding your blind spots, such as a lack of empathy, or right, these types of things where maybe your technical prowess over the years isn't going to serve you so well in those next steps, uh, where you have to be interacting with a much broader set and type of people in your ecosystem. So
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, as a leader, what do you believe are the key ingredients to building a high-performing technology team?
yeah, I think if you are coming into a new engagement, so for me, I think of it like number one, you just have to know where you're going. So what's the vision? I am huge on on vision, on ideation, like what is the big picture? With that, you can start to back into smaller, more tactical plans, right? So the vision, the strategy, you need to know where you're going, and then you can start to design around the skills you need in the team or teams. Um, that gets into technical architectures, but also process design. And so starting from the vision, you kind of get to the bread and butter, like what are the technical skills and the types of roles we need. But I'd build on top of that bread and butter stuff, which are those skill sets, those roles. And now you start to get into like, I guess, above the line stuff, the soft skills, the interpersonal dynamics, this experience that people are bringing, life experience, work experience. And so now you're starting to look at the things that come together and form, I guess, what you would call culture, right? Like there's a billion things in the business world about culture, and you can't design it and whatever, right? But you can really pick personalities and people on top of and beyond technical skills or technical roles to start to fill that in and build that team or teams. I think on top of that, so like coming back, what are the key ingredients? Again, vision, baseline skills, what's above the line, those soft skills, that's where you're starting to get into culture. And I think it's selecting for complementary like personalities, but also contrasting personalities. And that I think can work both ways. I probably tend or have a bias towards like, and maybe most people do, picking people similar to you or similar views or similar, right? Like you kind of mesh and you're like, great, let's join. And so I might personally try to like swing consciously on the other side and find people that might not be quite in that same like that same lane, right? Don't mesh quite as much. Find some more contrast so you can get a little bit more kind of depth of thought. I don't know, better quality of thought. Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. And I like the complementary but also contrasting type personalities. I think that and that you are so aware, and that goes back to what you said about the MBA, right? Being aware that you typically will choose people that are similar to you, and because you are aware of that, now you are consciously trying to pick some other people that are just different to you, right? Because you know that they will bring a different perspective to the team. I love that. Um,
yeah,
so let's talk a little bit about bringing that perspective to the table, right? You've spoken about the importance of psychological safety. Um, and psychological safety is a little bit about that. It's a little bit about, knowing that you can raise your hand, raise a different point of view, feedback, etc., and you are safe and you're okay to do that. How do you foster an environment where team members feel comfortable expressing their ideas or concerns without fear?
yeah. That's is a big question. And I don't know that I'm by any means qualified, but I do have personal experience. So I'll say what I'm qualified to speak to. But um, I'll go a little academic on us just because we're talking about psychological safety. And so for me, I first came into like the formality or seminal work of what I think is the seminal work of psychological safety, which was Google's research project. I think it was Project Aristotle. And so there's a big New York Times article in 2016 that was published. I wrote down the title because I can't remember it, but it was what Google learned from its quest to build the perfect team, right? And so the TLDR out of that, at the end of the day, pretty lengthy article, really did come down to, if you can demonstrate psychological safety with a big kind of air quotes, right? What does that actually mean? Those are probably where you get the most high performing, productive teams. So, what is psychological safety? How do you build it? I think a huge component of that, they gave examples of being vulnerable. So, like a leader being vulnerable with the team feeling safe to be vulnerable with the leader, and with each other, right? And so, how are you really getting to know each other on a professional level, on a personal level, and then of course, what are the kind of environments or capabilities, well, yeah, what are the environments, the routines, the daily norms, the group norms that let that type of stuff happen? And so for me, as I just kind of look back over successful, safe highly performing teams that I've been a part of and orgs, um, a lot of that is having some lightheartedness. It's you've got daily stand-ups. You have maybe the space to be outside of the really strict, like, you know, whatever scrum. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What are your impediments slash roadblocks? You know, a lot of the teams I've been on, uh, we would buffer in something called the 16th minute, and that's for your parking lot or icebox items. So like you're giving your stand up, but you're in a parking lot. And then oftentimes the 16th minute, which is going another like, you know, from minute 16 on, it kind of will go on. And that's where you get to potentially, with certain teams, start to just figure out like, what did you guys do last night? What happened over your weekend? What are you dealing with? Right. Who's ever faced this in personal life? I've got, you know, helping with aging parents or kids that are changing into different types of schooling, high school, middle school, like all of these types of things that can come together and just make us human and connect, right?
That's beautiful. I love it. I think I share a lot of the way that you think about teams, and I try to do the same with my team. Sometimes you get it, and sometimes it doesn't work as well. But
Yep.
the important thing is to try. But tell me about if you have any specific examples of how this approach has benefited your teams, or a specific example where getting to know a team member personally helped unlock their full potential.
Yeah. Um, I gotta think about that one for a second. Well, so number one, for me personally, I think it has been a learned, probably a learned skill. I'm not generally a super open person. Like over time, I think over time I've gotten more and more open. I'm a bit introverted, right? I like to recharge with a book, on a walk, in my own mind, kind of churning through things, and that's where I get my energy back. Um, but within work and professional appropriate reason, right? We don't want too much information, right? You don't want to be an oversharer. But there are like really key components where you can open up and share more about yourself, right? Quirky little hobbies. I love to champion like a Friday afternoon, close the week out meeting, usually with teammates, where we just get to kind of have an open session and you can nerd out on different stuff. Maybe you're nerding out on side projects, uh, hobbies like how you're propagating plants indoors this winter or growing gourmet mushrooms or whatever, right? But it's just letting your hair down, it's being able to be like that. And so that's something for me I've learned over time and then really like champion and enjoy the ability to share that, which lets others feel comfortable, you know, letting out their eccentricities as well. Um, to get to your kind of original question, like where have I seen some of that come into play and maybe unlock full potential? I think one example I can that comes to mind is back from my time at Blue Stem Brands. I in getting to know people on a personal level, had an employee that was new to technology, had just kind of come out of an associate's program, DevOps engineering team that we were on. And he was very like outgoing, really good with people, sometimes the opposite of what you might consider a traditional, like, you know, deep nerdy engineer who might not be good with people. And he ran and moderated a pretty huge and popular Reddit subreddit that had grown crazy exponentially over the years. Super nerdy space. And so learning little things like that and connecting the dots between like the ability for him to kind of connect and communicate both across our team and other people in other technical teams and business teams really set up that like, hey, maybe a management track, right? Like technical management is closer to being a reality in your career path than staying really technical and really focused, right? And so you can start to see those types of skills, those
Right.
soft skills, those above the line things, because there's like this huge strength in a personal hobby and pastime and passion that's directly applicable and can benefit in like a management type role. So that's one good example. And so actually, when I had left Blue Stem Brands, I had recommended that he step in and fill in as a engineering manager in the absence that I was leaving. So it was pretty cool. Yeah.
That's pretty nice. And if you didn't know that much about this person, if you didn't know that he was leading that subreddit and that he was so good in communicating and all of that, maybe you could have thought, oh, this guy's just not too much into it, right? I mean, he's not focused, he's not detail oriented, he's not whatever, right? But just knowing more about that person helps you realize where the strengths were and how to channel those. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Um, what challenges have you faced in creating or maintaining psychological safety in the tech environment?
Yeah. So um, I think you've probably said it a few times already though. Like oftentimes in tech environments, both in really large companies, but also I've been more in a startup space for the last I'll call it like 5 years. And so there is, I'm trying to think of some of the job description catchphrases, fast-paced environment, need to be a rock star, like blah blah blah, right? It's like okay, roll your eyes because this means yeah, buckle your seatbelts. Like we're expecting to move like super, super fast, and you're going to be delivering as quick as we can. Now that I'll reserve judgment. That's a separate conversation. But moving quickly in that fast-paced environment, that's where having some good processes and practices in place to ground yourself on. And so, in the face of chaos, can you come back to some baseline, regroup, iterate, and release, right? And so you're just trying to get that delivery cadence, and hopefully it's not manic and exceptional every 2 weeks or whatever. So with that though, um, what challenges? I would say some of the challenges is just making those good habits. So can you, if you're spinning up new teams, introducing new processes, like how do you get the team into a groove for that daily iterative flow and open up the space in those potentially like very strict processes, daily stand up, backlog grooming, etc., to actually have the cultural type engagement that actually builds, vulnerability and knowledge of each other personally. So getting those good habits in place, that's a challenge, right? Potentially. And not just being dogmatic to the framework, Kanban, Scrum, like whatever, and like making it work for you, the team, the culture that you're building, right? Always make adjustments. So the second thing though, is now you've got a really great processes in place, but we're human. The situation, the business environment is evolving and changing. The software we're delivering is changing. The other thing you want to do is be able to like have your retrospectives and actually adjust those well-worn paths and processes when they're no longer serving you well, right? Or when you get out of a habit where now you're no longer like actually connecting authentically or genuinely. So what kinds of things can you do, whether it's on a periodic kind of break the routine basis, like a quarterly thing, or just making adjustments to the daily stuff. Like, let's get back to what used to work, a Friday afternoon meeting where we just have no agenda and can demo cool things. And so keeping good habits, forming good habits, but also dropping the things that are no longer serving you or coming back to things that used to work that you might not be doing anymore. And so with that, I guess it's really just being ready to evolve and change with the ebb and flow of delivery, business environment, all of those things.
It's beautiful. So you have to find the groove, but you also have to be able to make some changes to that groove when needed, right? Don't get stuck
Yeah.
on something if it's not working anymore. Change something, go back to something that was working before. And it's a fine balance to find.
Yeah. when I'm hearing you speak and thinking of your musical background, and I just imagine there's got to be similar analogs, right, or metaphors
Yes,
in
sir.
solo music and in playing with a band, right?
You as you were speaking, I was thinking about music and I was thinking about it, and I loved the words that you were choosing to express what you were trying to express, right? And the groove, I think the groove is it's the groove, the pocket, it's just phenomenal. But yeah, you can only stay there so much. Sometimes you just gotta change. Um,
Yeah.
so how do you balance the need for technical excellence with the need for empathy and connection, right? I mean, people might be hearing us and they might go like, yeah, I love psychological safety, but sometimes you have to be very strong on the feedback. Does psychological safety mean that you cannot be strong on the feedback? How do you balance both?
Yeah. So you shared some of these questions beforehand, and my bullet point is tough one. This is a tough one. Um, okay, so for me especially, and when I see the word empathy and emotions, personally, that is one area of my life where, as a person, I've had to just put a lot of effort into learning and growing, right? I'll inherently face emotions, and I like my default state is to kind of retract, come back
Right.
into myself. Like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. I don't like that. And so with that, like empathy means a few different things for me. And there's emotional empathy. Like people are going through a difficult time, and can you identify and like feel and realize like what that also feels like if you've gone through the same thing or imagine that you're going through it. There's also an empathy in terms of like knowing who you're speaking to, who you're going to present to, who you're working with, and kind of knowing where they're at and how they need to be communicated to, how they need to have stuff presented to. And that's actually so that empathy, it's very important in knowing people on that personal level, like knowing that you're uh, really into music, a musician, knowing hobbies helps us to bridge the gap between analogs and metaphors and things that like bring better connection to the things that you're talking about. There's an empathy and a delivery and a connection that we can cohesively form kind of that group culture and knowledge with. So, um, so how do you balance that? So we've got empathy in place. We know each other personally. That allows for a lot of permission and forgiveness, right? Like as we know each other better and better, we can assume best intent going into our interactions with each other. When we make a mistake, which we inevitably do, I say something offensive, you say something offensive, we do something and someone feels slighted. If we don't have that psychological safety and trust built with each other, it's going to be a lot harder to overcome and forgive and move through that situation. So that all is coming together to like be that healthy team. Now the team has to be executing. So it's you know, kumbaya, we're all happy, we're all close. We can quickly forgive each other, but now we've got deadlines, we have budgets, we have to deliver. In a startup environment, it's super stressful because maybe if you don't ship that feature, you don't get the customer. And now, payroll's tight, like who knows, right? There's all kinds of stresses that are coming in. So how do we deliver and do an amazing job? Well, that's our skills. That's those baseline things of why we hired and brought the team together. And a lot of times that technical excellence, that march, you get blinders on. And that is where a lot of the maybe offenses and stuff can come. It's we need to deliver, we need to hit the timeline, get out of my way. This is what has to happen, right? You move out of, I think if I can say it better, from a leadership perspective, sometimes you have to move out of this enabling, facilitating model and sometimes get into a bit more authoritarian stance, right? Like we're facing an incident. We need to have a incident commander. This is how things are going to go. You are going to go do this, right? And so how do you balance all of that? Um, I I do think it's rambling on and on now is that combination of both. Like, can you in in calm, if I use a military analogy, like train in peacetime, get to know each other well, have that connection, so that in the heat of the moment, in the churn and the delivery and the high pressure situations, you can still kind of get through it without gross offense and hurt feelings and all of those types of things. So, how do you balance it? You just do, I guess. You figure it out as you go.
It's a beautiful answer. It's a beautiful answer, and it's great feedback can be turbocharged with empathy because now the message can be received in a different way because now we are both vulnerable and now we understand each other where we are coming from. And so words can sometimes be inefficient, but the more context we have on a person, the better we will understand words and where they are coming from. And if we do
Yeah.
that the right way in peacetime, then we will forgive each other in a better way during wartime, where there's just no time, right?
Yeah.
You just have to execute, right? So I think you said it was a tough one, but I loved your answer. You know, we could just write it down. It's a chapter for a book. So I loved it.
That's great.
Um, so Jared, in your experience, how does the culture of a technology team impact innovation and creativity?
Yeah. How does it impact uh, innovation, creativity? So, inherently, if we're talking software engineering, cloud engineering, data engineering, like the engineering practice, digital engineering, it's an inherently creative process, which some people from outside of the industry are like, might not think that, but you really want to, there's a lot of creativity that's coming in that. And so that can come a lot of different ways, right? We're all inspired in different ways and can kind of like problem solve and work through things in our own way. But nurturing innovation and that creativity in the team, for me, you got to have, despite deadlines and delivery obligations, you do need to have the space, the buffer, the allowance for focus, so that creative and deep thinking work can be done, right? And so if you zoom back to like traditional kind of textbook Scrum, what's the Scrum Master doing? What's our goal? It's to protect, the focus and the time of the team being the engineer, right? QA, et cetera. Um, and so culturally, do you get them that deep focus space, or are you riddling engineers' days with context switches and interruptions? Um, that's sort of a given kind of textbook answer, but in practice, it's true. Like, how do we get the deep focus times? And it's not just engineers, that's in general as well. Like, if you need to write, if you need to do deep thinking and strategizing, longer term vision, that's super important. Um, I think the psychological safety comes. So I've got one example. I often, so creativity, innovation. A lot of times I will think to myself, man, that's dumb or that's stupid. I might even say it out loud. And then I know I've trained myself to say, man, when I say these words, there's a flag. It probably means there's something about that that I do not understand, right? Like maybe I'm thinking of it only from one perspective, or maybe it's a technical concept and it truly is like, this is so hard. It's dumb. Like, this is stupid. I don't need to know it, right? And so coming up with little things like that, it's going to vary for people and teams where you can kind of call it out and say, well, wait, here's a moment to pause. Let's like actually think of this in a more, you can say first principles or a 360 perspective. And that's where your diversity of thought, the team dynamics can come in better. So how do you get those opportunities to decompose and look at those types of problems that we face in different ways and solve for them? And then building on that, there's dozens of TED Talks and different things, but it's phrases like uh, and championing stuff like, hey, what I'm trying to figure out is, and being able safe to say that to others, right? Like I'm not going to be judged as, oh my gosh, Jared's so dumb if he's asking this question. It's like, how might I, whatever, right? What are other phrases? The creativity part, imagine if, and hey, let's go on a tangent for a few minutes, even if it is a little bit sci-fi and crazy, because sometimes that's going to trigger those brainstorms and things where you're like, wait a minute, that one thing we just said isn't so crazy and actually does fit into this architectural pattern or this approach to that, product feature we're working on or whatever. So, um, number one, ultimately, it's having that space, the bandwidth, and the buffer time to be able to get into those conversations and into those moments on an individual level and on a team and group level.
Very good, very good. I love it. And we have to be super intentional about it, right? Because we can
Yeah.
say it, but if we're not intentional and we do not execute on finding those, that space, that time, that bandwidth, um, and enabling it the right way, it doesn't really happen. So I love it. Um, Looking ahead, you know, technology keeps changing. How do you think leadership in technology will evolve to accommodate all of the changes that we are seeing in terms of, technical aspects of team development?
Um, Man, this is it's been a rapidly evolving space. Like you could ask this question 20 years ago and there'd be like a massive answer, right? Like every 5 years you can ask this question. And I think it's actually gonna have similar themes in that things are moving exponentially faster. And as people, as humanity, if we're looking at the technology innovation curve, we're probably like early in the curve and moving into the exponential curve where you're going up and to the right.
Right?
Um, but it's just going to accelerate, right? And so looking ahead, how do I think leadership in tech will evolve to accommodate the human and technical aspects of team development? I think that we will start to see a lot more, how do I say it? Like blending of technical skills and well-defined roles. And what I mean by that is like we have at our disposal, November 13th, 2024, half a dozen remarkably powerful, generative AI tools at our disposal, just right at our fingertips. And we have brainstorming buddies. I may not have coded for 10 years or used Python or some other specific thing. And I can really quickly go from a like JavaScript example to a pretty decent, well-formed port of that to Python or something I'm familiar with, or an English language description of it, or across language boundaries pretty well, right? So all of these kind of translation barriers, if you will, both technical and in general, are being removed. If they're not for everybody right now, they're like basically there, right? Another generation two of smartphone technology, and it's in place. So that lets us start to blend a little bit more. I can be maybe not a domain expert, but I can quickly be up to speed with almost any domain, right? And I still have it's that T-shaped concept. So the breadth of knowledge or your ability to be wider and more knowledgeable quickly is going to increase. I think you still have a deep expertise in something, ways of thinking, ways of leading people, technical development, right? Like I don't think that's actually going away. There's still value in like deep, very technical, like computer science, uh, data science, all of that, right? Um, but okay, so leadership in the tech space starting to get more broad. The people you're leading are going to start doing more things more easily. And so you're kind of moving into, I think, maybe a generalist enhanced with your co-pilots, your agents type of world. And so leadership wise, like how do you adopt and adapt in that space? And how do you champion that with your teams, your employees, and do all of that stuff in a safe and responsible way, right? Where you're not maybe leaking a bunch of information uh, that's proprietary and confidential to public, consumer focused generative AI systems, foundation models, and things of that nature. But and so maybe that's where kind of a leadership perspective, um, risk and compliance focus comes into play to have a little bit of that broader kind of protective perspective, yet really push and hit the emerging tech agents, tools, skill and velocity accelerating things, right? And so super early days, there's a few studies. I think one really good one out of what is it, the Boston Consulting Group. I think I might have read it on Professor Ethan Malik, who does a lot of generative AI writing lately. Great stuff to read. Talks about like early studies looking at technical and business workforce that are using generative AI in their day to day. There is potentially not a huge uplift in the most expert employees kind of like interaction, right? They're already just like the 10x developer, right? Like they're very, very adept, skilled, fast, capable. So now you loop in a generative AI tool or an enhanced IDE, and it's going to help a little bit, but they're already kind of like at the peak of their performance. So you get a little bit of uplift. But now you take an earlier career person, kind of in that same track, or maybe not as adept and skilled, and that uplift, right? That skill gap improvement is high, right? And so now you're starting to get this equalizing layer, if you will. So now your whole team can start to deliver, I think, at a similar velocity and quality as like the most skilled, experienced people. Again, super early. It's super fun to see how industry leaders, I really like a lot of what Claire Vaux, who's the CPO of Launch Darkly, a developer tool platform, and the creator of Chat PRD, so like a product manager focused, extension of OpenAI. Really, she does a lot of recent talking about the more blended roles where product managers are taking more actual like creation and delivery of code and software and prototypes. And so, yeah, it's super interesting. How's leadership in tech going to be focused? I think it's just going to be trying to keep up with all of that and help guide and shape the technical teams in these enabling technologies and more rapid and higher quality, hopefully, delivery of products and services and value.
It's so interesting, and there are so many tangents to go on from what you said, right? Even just education and how we learn new things, right? And how um we went from being younger kids and having to go to a library to get some books to learn something. And so the speed of learning, the amount of information that was available to you was a different thing altogether to what it is today. And that only keeps advancing. And now you have all the information in the world at your fingertips. How do you manage that? How do you learn quicker? How do you have the right analytical skills to understand the information that is being put in front of you, to have a dialogue with the LLM that is, or whatever AI is putting that information in front of you, because that's where most of the learning happens, in that dialogue, right?
Yeah.
But also that deep technical expertise that will also help you kind of make sense of that dialogue, right? Because if I don't know coding and I ask, oh, put this in Java or Python, whatever, I will look at it and go like, okay, whatever, I have no critical point of view on it, right? Unless I
Yeah.
have some background or some experience.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And I love what you said about the blending and the blending of roles. And it got me thinking as well on, we've been hearing about low code tools for a while, right? And all of it, all the time there's a new one, there's a new one, there's a new one. All of these LLMs are low code tools, actually, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
way,
Mm-hmm.
because they help you, they will help, and they will get better and better and better. And so a product manager maybe that before didn't have the technical chops or the technical interest, it will get way closer to just being able to code whatever they want to code, right?
That's right.
Uh,
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. It's definitely interesting, and I appreciate your answer. And that could be enough topic for a new episode.
It would be. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you start a whole nother episode just talking about the like GPT engineers and various like let's just speak product words, like what's the business problem, how do you want it to look, and
Mm.
have it deliver, right? And so I've done a lot of thinking about that lately too. Rapid application prototype, right? RAD was like
Right,
and it's
right.
like, oh yeah, that's it's in a new it's in a new stage of delivery, right? Where it's actually hosted and running on the internet in literally moments. So yeah,
It's insane.
fun
It's insane.
times.
It's insane. Fun times. One final, very random question to you. You said a little bit in some of our conversations, but what do you do when you are not working?
Yeah. What do I do when I'm not working? It depends. I do my best to think about future me, and I work out. I try to get up early. I'm not an early person, but I force that because it's the best time it fits in. So I try to stay healthy and get workouts in. Thinking about and inspired by books like is it Outlive, Outlast, Peter Attila. There's a lot of kind of like longevity books, right? So how do you not necessarily live longer, but live well into those older years? So that's what keeps me going to the gym right now. Um, I am a family guy. I've got a handful of kids, a couple in high school now, and really just trying to support them to think broadly, critically, and think for themselves and be engaged in society and the world around them. So that's a lot of activities. And then I like to disconnect. So I like to nerd out and deeply study and learn things like growing tropical plants here in Minnesota during the deep winter indoors with grow lights and propagate them and different botanical kind of and horticultural practices. And so and then a lot of reading. So I find a new topic. I'm like, man, that really sparked an interest for me, and I'm like three to five books. I'm ordering used textbooks, and it's I like to say my soft retirement will probably be going back to school, like for a botany degree or this, all kinds of different stuff. So I like to learn. I like to nerd out on new topics and yeah.
It's a good time for ongoing learners and nerds and curious people right now, right? The the
That's right.
the it's the best time to be alive because of the amount of information and the amount of stuff that you can learn. So I'm happy to
Yeah.
hear that. Jared, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this again sometime in the future.
Oh man, thanks so much for inviting me and for the opportunity.